welcome to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Online at fppradio.com. So I've got a very special episode today. No. It's not like the ABC after-school episode where little Timmy gets raped or, something, and they tell your parents, make sure you watch this very special episode. So it's not that kind of very special episode. But it is different in that I'm actually going to have Derek J. Freeman on the show with me. You probably know Derek J. from Peace News Now, from the Freedom Fiends, from Free Talk Live, and, of course, from Derek J.'s Victimless Crime Spree.
Yo. Hey, Darryl. How's it going?
Well, it's going better than it was a couple of hours ago.
Not even 1 hour ago. You were behind bars.
Yes. Actually, not really bars. Although technically there are 2 bars in the middle of the window.
Not the fun kind of bar either.
Yeah, not the fun kind of bar. So I was in jail over the weekend. And Derek, you've got some experience in jail. Actually, the same jail that I was in.
Yeah, we probably had all the same jail guards. And it's interesting to me that you just spent the weekend in jail because you used to be a jail guard. And that was one of the first things that I learned about you.
Right.
So I want to know what your perspective was like from the inside. Was it different, or was it about what you expected?
It was a little different than I expected, primarily because, this jail operates a good bit differently than the jail that I was a guard at. And
how so?
Of course, that was 14 years ago that I was a corrections officer. The primary difference was the classification thing. So I was all weekend in what they called classification, meaning that I was in something that resembled solitary confinement, but I was not in solitary confinement. And the jail that I worked at in Pennsylvania 14 years ago, it was actually right at 14 years ago, around now that I quit. It was sometime December of 2000 that I had quit. So, damn near 14 years ago. And they didn't do this classification thing where you were kind of in solitary but not really in solitary.
Was everyone the same classification then?
No, not everybody was same classification. They had the A unit, which I called the A-hole unit, and that's where they would have the violent
people. Yeah.
The people that actually did crime. Well, the murderers and the rapists were in A.
But that's the idea. I mean, one thing that jails have going for them, at least in the U.S., is they're not just dungeons. They do try to separate the violent criminals from the victimless. And I wasn't around anyone who had really committed any real crimes for the most part.
Right.
Until I was ready to leave.
So during the classification, which again is very much like being in solitary, except for during the hour and a half that I would get to be out of my cell, I would actually get to mingle with the other people that were in classification.
What were they in for?
I only spoke with 2 of the guys. One was in for theft by deception, and the other was in for some kind of gun charge. So one person that, had a victim, the other person most likely did not.
Yeah, well, why didn't you talk to the other 2?
They pretty much stayed to themselves.
Yeah, some people in jail just look like, don't talk to me.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to leave them be.
Yeah, and there were, well, technically, I guess there were really 3 days that I actually had day room time because I got in Friday at 2 o'clock. Day room was from 3:30 to 5. So the first day, I was still not really sure what was really going on, and the one guy came over, started talking to me. So we sort of hung out, if you will, during the day room time. We'd play cards together.
What'd you play? Uno? I liked Uno.
We would play solitaire. Like, we'd help each other play solitaire while the other guy was reading the paper.
Did you ever play double solitaire? That's a fun one I learned in jail.
No, never played double solitaire.
You can play solitaire, same game, with 2 people.
Okay.
It's like sort of a competition. It's a co-opetition.
Okay, and then we'd just play Go Fish.
A classic.
Of course, a classic. And then the other guy I only spoke to briefly, but I had overheard him talking to somebody. He's from Mass, some guy from Mass, first time in New Hampshire, and wound up, welcome to New Hampshire, here's our jail. And that's the guy that was in on some kind of gun charge, he said. But what I thought was really interesting was this classification thing, because when I was a jail guard, they would keep the people in booking for like the first 12 to 24 hours before putting them in a unit. And here they keep you in classification for anywhere between 24 to 72 hours.
Yeah, and those are weekday hours. So if it's a weekend, for example, if you come in on a Friday.
Which I did.
Yep. At 2 p.m.
Which I did.
That clock doesn't start ticking, until you walk in. So it's 10 hours on Friday. Then Saturday and Sunday don't count. You could, really, then
Wow.
Monday it resumes. So you could be in on Friday and not be classified until Wednesday.
That is absolutely insane.
Yeah, and that means, you're sitting there alone in a jail cell. It's not technically solitary confinement, but you can't be with anyone, and you don't have the certain privileges, like being able to go out in the day room.
Right, although I did get to read a couple of books while I was in jail.
What'd you read?
I read a book that I'd never heard of before, and apparently it's part of a series that I had never heard of before. The Master Harper of Pern was the name of the book. Fantasy, dragons, lords and ladies, and dragons.
Was there sex?
Oh, yes. Yes, there was. Of course, it wasn't in detail, but, you knew that it was happening, and you knew that the Master Harper was getting it pretty much whenever he wanted from whomever, for the most part. But
any philosophical books? Did you see any of your books in jail? Because some of your books have been donated
I
to that
did not
jail.
see any of my books in jail. I did get to read Aldous Huxley's A Brave New World. And I must say...
Had you never read that before?
I had never read that before.
Are you kidding me? I start out Derek J's Victimless Crime Spree with an interview of Aldous Huxley about that book. It is so important to me. I think it's the world we're living in.
I was rather disappointed
Why?
with the book.
Are you kidding? For what?
Because it was not a Brave New World. It was
That's right.
It was a cowardly, old, stuffy world.
You're right. Yeah, exactly.
So, when I'm reading and the one guy that they called the Savage, John or Jim,
right?
When he goes up and he starts throwing the drugs out the window, and he tells people, think for yourselves, be free. I'm like, yeah! And then he gets his ass kicked.
That's right.
And then he winds up going to live in, like, a lighthouse, and people come out and they bully him until he kills himself.
Yeah.
That was not brave. That's cowardly.
Yeah, but it's a future world that might be, not that has to be.
Right, but... in some ways, it's not really a future world. It's kind of a now world, only we don't do the Bokana, whatever it's called, to make 96 siblings of the same exact genes. But let's talk about that book a little bit, especially, the alphas, the betas, etc. We'll get to that when we come back.
Hi, I'm Darryl W. Perry, and I need your help to take Peace, Love, Liberty Radio on the road. In the spirit of Motorhome Diaries and Liberty on Tour, I intend to take the message of peace, love, and liberty on the road. I intend to leave New Hampshire at the conclusion of the New Hampshire Liberty Forum and return at the beginning of PorcFest. During the 104-day trip, I'll be visiting at least 10 cities across the country, speaking to people about the ideas of peace, love, and liberty, while continuing to produce daily Liberty media. Pensacola, Florida, Austin, Texas, Sedona, Arizona, and Denver, Colorado are already on the map. If you have a college group, a local Liberty on the Rocks, or other Liberty meetup that you'd like me to visit, you can possibly add your event to my calendar. To find out more about the tour or to donate, visit tour.fppradio.com. That's tour.fppradio.com. The Doublespeak Dictionary by Leslie Starr O'Hara satirizes the marked difference between the ideal of we the people and the reality of we the elite, while offering an insightful glimpse into the clockworks of the totalitarian mind. Ever irreverent but never irrelevant, the Doublespeak Dictionary serves as a subversive and humorous but timely reminder that the emperor has no clothes. The Doublespeak Dictionary is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. Special guest today, Mr. Derek J. Freeman, and we're talking about A Brave New World.
Yeah.
Now, you said that you really loved the book, that...
It changed my world. I read it in 9th grade after reading 1984. In my freshman English class, and I was just so blown away. And my initial thought was, well, thank goodness this hasn't happened. I didn't see it the way you did. You have a little more perspective and experience, with being
right.
outside of 9th grade. But once I realized, 1984 has passed and none of this stuff happened, so I'm safe. This is fine. But then there are all these parallels between not just 1984, but this Brave New World. Like you were talking about the gammas, the epsilons, and the
deltas.
betas. And
I thought it was interesting, before you continue, it seemed as though the alphas and the betas sort of intermingled a little bit, but they definitely did not mingle with the gammas, the deltas, or the epsilons.
Correct.
So go ahead and continue your thought there.
Well, I just think it's like... I don't know. I see the world... So the opening chapter of Brave New World is inside this egg-making factory where, if I remember correctly, there's some professor or scientist, and he's giving a tour to these students of how the eggs are made in this Brave New World society.
How they're fertilized.
Right. And harm is done to these fetuses to induce damage to their brains and to change them,
right,
so that they have a certain type of existence when they're alive and fully grown. And that may be to limit their intelligence so that they're just happy with what they've got. And I see a lot of parallels between what's happening in that book and what's happening in our world.
Right, I certainly see some parallels, and there's even a lot of parallels. And I'm glad you mentioned 1984. There's a lot of parallels between 1984 and A Brave New World. And the perspective, after having read A Brave New World, and I listened to 1984 on tape a couple of years ago, after reading, I'm just going to say reading both of those books, because listening to a book on tape is a lot like reading it. So after reading both of those books, one thing that has always struck me is in the dystopian realm, you never really hear what it's like from the perspective of somebody that's not in the know, if you will.
Yeah, like you don't hear from any of the gammas or epsilons, like
right,
about what their life is like.
In 1984, you don't really hear what it's like to be one of the proles.
Right.
And one thing that I thought was interesting about 1984 was there's the saying, proles and animals are free. It was only the people that were in the party that were controlled by the party.
I don't know I don't know about that. I mean, I don't remember it that well. Do you think there's a parallel there to modern day?
In some ways.
Like the politicos are people who are controlled by the game. Like, I always think this politics game is a trap for smart people. Like, it's where the deltas or the betas or the alphas,
the betas and the alphas,
might go to get stuck in the system and never progress to be truly free and independent, at least in their own minds. But politics is like this big game for smart people to get trapped and think that they can have freedom by manipulating the pieces on the chessboard. But it's not about those pieces. It's about you.
Right, and there's, towards the end of A Brave New World, there's the discussion between the Savage and Munns. I forget his first name, but he's the guy that, he's the controller of the world something controller of Eastern Europe. And they're having a conversation, and it goes on to basically be a philosophical conversation about why everybody can't be an alpha or a beta. Like, why we need deltas and epsilons and gammas.
Yeah, and it's a bunch of baloney. It's because he needs them, not because they need to be that way.
Right, but as I was reading it, I started thinking about some of the philosophies that some people call in to Free Talk Live with.
Oh, yeah.
And say, well, we have enough resources to where people don't need to work, and we could just live in this existence to where everybody gets whatever they need, and people could just do whatever they want. And as I was reading the conversation where he was talking about, we tried giving people 4-hour work days, and the only difference was they took more drugs. And the drug in question, it's called Soma. And
I think most people know that. The book's been out for like 70 years. So
right, but I'd never read it before.
There's no spoiler alerts for a book that's 75 years old.
Right, but I'm still not entirely sure what the modern parallel to Soma would be. Would it be ecstasy? Would it be cannabis? Would it be a combination of the two?
No, it's what's the ADD medication that everyone uses?
Ritalin.
Adderall.
Adderall. Okay.
Yeah, Adderall is the equivalent of Soma, in my opinion.
Yeah, so you would take this and then sort of, zonk out, and everything's great and wonderful.
Well, it's not. So I say Adderall is the equivalent of Soma in Brave New World, not because of the effects of, like, everything is wonderful. There are certainly other drugs that would model that, but it's because it makes them efficient workers, right?
Well, no.
It's required for them to be in this, like, working world.
But
maybe I've got it wrong.
It didn't make them efficient workers. It made them forget any of their problems.
Oh, okay. Well, then I've got it
wrong. It made them happy.
Yeah, maybe
so
it's
they
alcohol.
would take it at the end of the day.
Sounds like alcohol.
I forget. There was a saying that was repeated in what they called the hypnopedics.
Yeah.
And there was, 1 gram and you don't give a damn or something.
Yeah.
2 grams and something. And, if people took 2 grams, then a lot of times they wouldn't wake up for 18 hours. So that's why I was thinking maybe like a combination between the effects of MDMA and cannabis, because it was also one of these things that they would give the people and then they would sing the Orgy Porgy song and then everybody would just wind up in one big massive heap of flesh.
Yeah, I think you've got it. It's a drug that doesn't really exist, but it's sort of a combination of lots of different drugs. I heard the author, Aldous Huxley, used mescaline, which is like a drug similar to LSD.
And they mention mescal. The Savage's mother took mescal when she was living in the reservation in New Mexico.
That's because Aldous Huxley wrote a book called Doors of Perception while tripping on mescaline. Like while tripping. He wrote
While
that book.
tripping.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that is where the band The Doors gets their name, from The Doors of Perception by Aldous Huxley. The same author of
I had
Brave
no
New World.
clue. I just figured that The Doors got their name from the time when, people were naming bands after just random things like the Beatles, the Monkees, the Spiders, the Who? What? The band? Who are they? They're the band. Who? No, not the Who. There's more when we come back on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio.
Coinbase is a simple and secure online Bitcoin wallet for sending, receiving, and storing Bitcoin. Coinbase also allows you to buy and sell Bitcoin using a bank account or use their tools to accept Bitcoin as a merchant. Opening a wallet is quick and easy, and for merchants, there are no transaction fees on the first $1 million worth of transactions. I trust Coinbase. You should too. Get started at coinbase.fppradio.com. Hi, I'm Darryl W. Perry, and I need your help to take Peace, Love, Liberty Radio on the road. In the spirit of Motorhome Diaries and Liberty on Tour, I intend to take the message of peace, love, and liberty on the road. I intend to leave New Hampshire at the conclusion of the New Hampshire Liberty Forum and return at the beginning of PorkFest. During the 104-day trip, I'll be visiting at least 10 cities across the country, speaking to people about the ideas of peace, love, and liberty, while continuing to produce daily Liberty media. Pensacola, Florida, Austin, Texas, Sedona, Arizona, and Denver, Colorado are already on the map. If you have a college group, a local Liberty on the Rocks, or other Liberty meetup that you'd like me to visit, you can possibly add your event to my calendar. To find out more about the tour or to donate, visit tour.fppradio.com. That's tour.fppradio.com.
Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Online at fppradio.com. Derek J. is joining me to discuss Jail, 1984, A Brave New World, and pretty much everything in between. Now, I realize that we discussed my experience in jail. We discussed the book that I read, actually one of the two books that I read, and I definitely want to wind up getting back to A Brave New World, but tell me more about your experiences in jail, because you were in for a lot longer than 72 hours.
Yeah, I was in for 60 days total, and
how many of those were in solitary?
0.
None.
Yeah,
okay.
I was not thrown in solitary because I was a good inmate and did everything I was told.
Okay, I thought you had some of your time was for failure to pay fines.
That's right. And so I was pulled into... okay, so I was sentenced to 540 days in the House of Corrections, all but some numbers suspended that I forget. And then there were fines on top of that, like a couple $1,000s. And fines, if you don't pay them, can be paid in jail time by sitting
$50 a day.
Right, and you can sit in solitary confinement. Now, while I was in jail, I wrote a motion to the court to change that fine into community service.
Okay.
And they accepted that while I was in jail. So I did not need to sit those days in solitary to pay off that fine.
Okay. So you were in general population the entire time.
Right. And about a week before I was released, the superintendent of the jail, Rick Van Wickler, pulled me aside into his office, and we had a little chat about the fines issue. He said, yeah, for most people, it's pretty effective for us to put them in solitary confinement. Oh, they can't come up with $200? Now they're in solitary. Oh, look at that. Their mom came and brought $200. Or, oh, look at that. Their wife came. Looks like they can come up with the money. It just we just need to hurt them.
Need a little bit of motivation.
Well, some would call it motivation. I would call it torture, because putting a person in a cage and keeping them from the outside world, I view that as torture, and
it is, and there are
does
studies.
Mental damage after like 24 hours.
Yeah, there are studies about the long-term effects of isolation.
Yeah, but fortunately, my jail experience wasn't much like that. I still consider it to be the worst part of my life. Like, I don't look back on it and say that was great. I say that was the worst part of my whole life.
I say the same thing about the 9 months that I worked as a prison guard. The only difference between being a prison guard and being an inmate is that the prison guard gets to go home to sleep.
Right.
So it's sort of like being on work release, only you're on sleep release.
Yeah, the only difference is the guard has to pay for his own housing, right? It's like you're in the same place all day. Well, I didn't feel as much isolation, fortunately, because I was able to blog from jail. I wrote letters to people on the outside, my friends, and they were able to publish them on freekeen.com. In fact, I still have my entire jail blog online on my website, derrickj.me. You can go back and read.
Give me the link. I'll put it in the show notes.
Yep, I've got it, derrickj.me. You just scroll down on the side. You'll see a link that says jail blog, and you can read it right there.
Give me the link to the jail blog, and I will put that link in the show notes so that anybody that wants to read your jail blog can do that.
I'll do that, too. I just wanted to read a couple of excerpts, because I haven't seen this in literally years.
Okay.
And so now I'm reading, here's May 21st, 2012, jail blog, day 15. I wrote the title, Depending on the Incompetent. I'm feeling frustrated tonight. The motions which I hand-wrote in response to the news that the Keene police is moving the court to grant them permission to destroy the evidence in my case were lost. I gave them to the officer on duty this morning to be photocopied, and instead, they were lost. I am crippled. Yeah, they were lost. I was taken down to change out and go to court today, then told to change back. No court. I was told that I wasn't allowed to use the phone because it would be a safety and a security risk.
How is using the phone a safety or security risk?
They allege that it's possible, if I know my court date and time from jail, and I'm allowed to use the phone within 24 hours of that date, then I will coordinate my friends to help me escape. That's what they were afraid of. That was their justification. Continuing from my blog post, I wrote, I can get used to dehumanization, to nudity, to groping, to being made into a worker drone, a slave to the state. What I cannot bear is being forced to depend on others when others are incompetent. It burns me up, and I've got several more paragraphs, and then I just end it with exclamation points, and this too shall pass.
So hold on, go back up to that real quick.
Sure.
You mentioned the dehumanization,
yeah,
and the nakedness.
Yeah,
Tell me about that.
That was horrible. So when you come in, they're like, okay, we got to make sure you don't have knives and stuff. So that means get naked, and here's a shower. You're going to shower using this shower.
In front of us.
In front of us. We're going to watch you shower, make sure you don't pull anything fishy. And then you have
this
to,
is
like,
after they give you a pat down, after taking your fingerprints.
Yeah, this is after everything. This is right before they change you out into jail clothes.
Yeah, the same thing happened to me, and I thought that it was very interesting. And then as it was happening, I remembered the Supreme Court decision from a couple of years ago where somebody had gone to jail on like an unpaid speeding ticket.
Right, and they had to get nude, right?
And they were strip searched, and so they filed a court case about it, saying that it's a violation of civil rights because the punishment doesn't fit the crime.
It's a violation of human rights to tell another person to get naked for them. And without their consent, and you're going to do bad things to them if they don't get naked. I mean, that is crazy to me. I had a real hard time with it, and I had
a hard time doing it when I was a jail guard.
Well, I imagine the jail guards also have a hard time with it. It's not something I feel they take pleasure in. It seemed like they regretted it, but I made it as uncomfortable as possible while it was happening because they're instructing me. All right, lift your arms up, show me your armpits, run your hands through your hair, let me make sure there's nothing in your hair. Open your mouth, open out your tongue, let me see, make sure there's nothing in your cheeks. Now turn around, grab your ankles, open your ass,
spread
cough.
the butt cheek and cough.
Yep, and when another man tells me to do that, and we're not on a date, he hasn't bought me dinner, I mean, it was really uncomfortable. I did say something to that effect.
Apologies for laughing, but I'm just thinking, the way you describe it, especially with you being a gay man, when somebody tells me to do that and we're not on a date, and he hasn't bought me dinner.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like I had no agency. I was not consenting to exposing my private regions.
Well, if you don't like it, go to another jail.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, you can't go to another jail because there's not free markets in the jails. If there were free markets in the jails, I would have gone to a jail that wasn't going to strip search me because I didn't pay a fine for something that, had no victim. Like, It was an unjust fine that they wanted me to pay. I said no. I go to jail, and I get strip searched.